Mark Santiago here, and welcome to the Empowered AF podcast, where each episode we share powerful strategies to help you communicate, act, and lead like an empowered man. Thanks for joining me. All right, we're live. I'm excited. I'm very excited about what I'm going to be talking about today. Today is a day where we really get into some of what I would call the nitty gritty, the hardcore shit that a lot of us don't want to actually look at. What I mean by that is that when we are held accountable to the standard, to the way we live our life, if we don't own our shit, if we don't look at the things that we have in our life as a byproduct of what we've allowed or what we've accepted, then we're gonna struggle. And if you're struggling in your marriage, if you're struggling in your job, if you're struggling with the weight scale, whatever it is that you're struggling with and you're frustrated with, there's a gap. And that gap comes from a place of having some sort of desire, some sort of goal, some sort of this is unacceptable because you've laid out in your mind that this isn't what I signed up for. I didn't sign up for a life to be miserable. I didn't sign up for a life to be horrible and filled with toxicity and all this shit. What I wanted was a life that it was good. What I wanted was a life that has meaning and substance and all of these things. And so the fact is your current reality is a byproduct of what you have grown to accept in your life until today. I'm gonna say it again. Your current reality is a byproduct of what you've grown to accept in your life today. Look at your bank account. What's in your bank account right now? When you think about that number, when you look at that number, some of you are depressed, some of you are happy, some of you are probably in between like, well, it's okay, I'm not broke, I'm not dead, I'm surviving, but man, I would love to have more. The fact is what is the reality of your bank account that you've accepted? If you find yourself just continuously just like coasting and you're not growing, or you continuously find yourself in cycles of debt, it's because you've accepted the reality that this is the standard that I'm going to live to, that this is the necessity that I have is to be like this. It's subconscious. It's not a conscious thing. You don't think about it and go, man, I just love being in debt. Man, I just love having these struggles. No, you're not thinking that. What is happening though is you've built patterns into your life. You've built standards into your life. You've built a certain level of necessity that dictates each of these things. Look at the situation with your wife, or your soon-to-be ex, or your ex-wife, whatever. What is the reality that you've accepted with your wife? How is she treating you? How are you responding? How are you showing up? Because everything that's happening right now, your current reality, is a byproduct of what you've grown to accept in your life until today. So what are you accepting in your marriage? What are you accepting? Some guys come into our program and they're like, well, I'm sleeping on the couch. I'm like, why? Well, because she told me to. Some guys come in our program and say, well, I moved out. Why? Because she told me to. What the fuck? Is that what you want? Do you want to live on somebody's couch? Do you want to do these things? Well, no, I just didn't know. No. Here's the thing, is you allowed your standards to drop. You allowed your necessity to drop to a point where you were okay and you accepted the reality that this is what it is. She doesn't want to be married to me, or she's mad at me, or she's angry with me. And so therefore, I'm just going to move out. I'm just going to make things easier. I'm just going to make life easy for her. Man, I've been there. I have been there. And I'm telling you, trying to make it easier for her is not going to save your marriage. It's not going to fix the problems. Unless you're actually ready to file for divorce, unless you're actually ready to move out, I highly, highly recommend you think about the standard that you want to live by, the standard you want to accept. Because most men will move out, most men will go on the couch, most men will avoid pain, will avoid what they're going through because they don't want to deal with the pain. They don't want to face the rejection. I posted this in my group the other day, which, by the way, if you're in our Empowered Man group, empoweredman.co/group, you get first access to these podcasts before they make it to Apple. I think we're like 4 or 5 or 6 weeks ahead of when they do that. So if you're really interested in hearing these live, because you can actually watch me live in our Empowered Man group, empoweredman.co/group, and you can hear what I'm talking about ahead of time. But if you're really in that place where you're just like frustrated and you're just like, well, I just got to save my marriage. I just got to do this. I just got to do that. What I found is that most men don't actually even want to save their marriage. What they want to do is not face the pain. What they want to do is ignore all of the shit. They want to just go back to the way everything was, right? I'll ask guys, if I could wave my magic wand and in 90 days we're having a cup of coffee or a beer, not at the same time because a beer and coffee would be weird, but let's say we're having that conversation. A lot of you would say, well, my marriage would be fixed and my wife and I would be back together again and my kids would be happy and wonderful. And all of this stuff, you create this fantasy of what you think is the best solution for your life and even for your wife. But is that really the standard that you're willing to accept? Because some of you, I know, not even just some of you, a lot of you are in absolute toxic situations. Some of you are in situations where your wife is openly cheating on you. Others of you are in situations where she's gaslighting the fuck out of you, and you have no idea if she's cheating on you. Others of you are in situations where you've been the asshole and you were not present. Do you really want to go back to a marriage where you're not present? This is why I say, you know what? Your old marriage is fucking dead. And the only way forward is to have a new marriage with your wife. And that means you don't go back to the old. What it means is you create something new. What it means is you level up your standards, that you raise your necessity to such a level where you go, I'm not going to accept anything less than functional, healthy communication. Because the more you accept of this toxic nature, the more you accept of what you're going through right now, guess what you're doing? You are teaching your body, you are teaching your brain, your mind, your soul, your spirit. You are teaching yourself it's okay. It's okay to get screamed at all the time. It's okay to live with a woman who's openly cheating on me. It's okay to live this way because I don't want to face the pain. I have no idea how to actually engage with her. Gentlemen, when you do this, you have accepted a standard that is below what your desire is. Now, you might be listening and go, you know what, I'm okay with that. I doubt it because no one's listening to my podcast who actually wants to live in shit. Nobody wants to sit in that mud. It just doesn't happen. Look at your kids. Look at the relationship you have with your children right now. Are you okay with that? Are you living up to the standard that you want to live with them? Are you okay with how they treat you? Are you okay with what you're teaching them and all of the character things and what you're developing in them? Because as a father, your goal, your job should be to develop character, to develop personhood in them so that they grow up not just to be productive citizens, but so they grow up to also lead the way you led so that they have children and their children and their children. Most of you have no thought whatsoever about legacy. So you accept bullshit from your kids. You accept all kinds of things from them as just, well, this is the way it is. I have issues with my kids all the time. One of my sons, we don't have the best relationship right now. So instead of just accepting that as my reality, I continue to lean in. I continue to look for ways to make stronger efforts to go, how can I connect with him? How can I help him feel loved and secured and valued, even though he's been through trauma? He's been through divorce. He's been through all this shit, but that doesn't mean I have to accept the reality of this situation. It doesn't mean I have to accept that that's just the way it's going to be, blase, blase. Look at your job. Look at your financial situation. Are you happy with your job? Are you happy with where you're at in that situation? What are you accepting as the reality of what's going on? Because what you have right now is what has led you up to this point. Your current reality in your job is a byproduct of what you've grown to accept in your workplace until today. That's what it is. That's your current reality. Are you okay with that? And another area to look at, I mean, let's be honest, let's be vulnerable here. Look at the weight scale. Look at your body. Are you okay with where you're at physically? I know I'm not. I'm not perfect in this at all, but I'm making choices every day to improve that. What are you doing to accept or not accept the current reality of your situation? You can look at yourself and go, well, I'm not happy with it, and just bury it in another Twinkie, or bury it in another beer, or bury it in another cigarette, or bury it somewhere else, because that's what men are good at doing. We're good at hiding. We're good at escaping instead of facing these fears. I was afraid of my wife for 17 years. I was afraid of being exposed as a fraud. I was afraid of business. I was afraid of the scale. I was afraid of all of these things, afraid of my kids. I was afraid of all of this. I lived in such fear and shame because I didn't want to face reality. And some of you are doing that right now. You're listening to this and you're like, fuck, I'm not happy with my reality. I'm not happy with where I am. This is not what I signed up for. You've got to raise your standards. You have got to raise your necessity. The more you can raise your necessity, the better your situation is going to get, because you start to form identity-based goals. You start to form this identity around, I'm going to live to a higher standard. Financially, what are you living like? Are you just accepting your reality of like, well, I'm going to be in a lot of debt and that's just the way it's always going to be? With your wife, well, we just always argue and that's the way it's always going to be. She cheated on me and that's the way it's always going to be. And there's nothing that's ever going to change. And that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is one of the biggest bullshits I've ever heard. And it's victim energy, and it's not for empowered men. If you want to be an empowered man, you have to change the focus. The focus has to go from you and it's all about you and your life to going, I want to create a legacy. I want to create something bigger than me. And in order for me to do that, I have to raise my standards. I have to raise my necessity. In our VIP program, we have an exercise around this concept that we call I am responsible. And it's where literally every guy has to come in and really quote every day for 7 days this particular mantra about the fact that they are responsible for everything that happens. Look, you're responsible for everything in your life right now. Your wins, your losses, your successes, your failures, you are responsible. There's not one other person that is responsible for those things. You can blame calamities, you can blame COVID, you can blame this, you can blame God, you can blame the devil, you can blame all these things. You can blame your wife, because I know I hear these conversations all the time. Well, my wife did this and she did that and she did this and she did that. I don't give a fuck what your wife did. What I'm looking at is how are you responding? Because most of you are like little boys and you're just reacting. You're just angry. You're just hurt. You're just all these things because you don't want to come to a place where you respond from strength, where you come at it from a place of strength. When what you're doing is reacting out of weakness. So I'd much rather mentor men who decide, I don't want to react from a place of weakness. I want to respond from a place of strength. I'll say it again. I want men who are empowered to say, I don't want to react from a place of weakness. I want to respond from a place of strength. And that is the difference. When you come to this place where you recognize that you are responsible for everything in your life, wins and losses, successes and failures, you are responsible, your life will change. Why? Because you start to raise your necessity. You start to raise your standards. You start to realize and recognize that I am the master of my fate. That wherever I go, whatever happens, I must have a strong internal locus of control. That I cannot be so focused on the external influences, what my wife is doing and what my job is doing and what the weight scale is doing. Guys, I get frustrated all the time. I'm in a plan. I'm working on my strength. I'm doing those things. And sometimes it's not, the goals are not where I want it to be. Or even in our business where it's like we don't quite hit the numbers we want to hit. We don't do the things that we want to do. And it can get frustrating. But I love the fact that I can go back and say, okay, I am the master of this. I am responsible ultimately for all of these things. If I have a team member that's not working out, if I have a sales guy that's not working out, if I have a marketing thing that's not working out, or an ad that's not working out, or if I have something that's not working out, I have to look at me and go, what is going on with me? If I look at my relationship with my girlfriend and things aren't going well, if I look at it, and I'm not saying they are, but if they weren't going well, I'd have to look at it and go, okay, what part am I playing in the failure of our relationship? And when things are going well, I can look at it and go, what part am I playing in the success of our relationship? And then what are the things I can continuously work on so that we don't get to a place of dysfunction, so that we don't get to a place of toxicity, because that's what we're accustomed to. But see, I'm no longer accustomed to that. I'm no longer accustomed to toxicity in a relationship, and I refuse to allow it to be in my relationship. How many of you actually have that same level of necessity? How many of you have that same level of standard where you go, I refuse to be baited into an emotional, manipulative situation. I refuse to just get angry and spout off the mouth. I refuse to do those things because I've raised my level of necessity. I've raised my standards to such a place where I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. I ain't going there. I refuse to live with someone who is openly cheating on me. I refuse to stay in a marriage that this person obviously doesn't want to be married to me anymore. And I'm willing to let go of her because she has let go of me. All of that comes back to your standards. I want you to ask these questions of yourself. What type of woman do you want in your life? What type of woman do you want in your life? Is she the woman that you want in your life, and why? Is she the type of woman that meets the needs you have? Is she the type of woman that you want to serve? Is she that type of woman? Here's another one. What kind of car do you want to drive? Are you okay with the car you drive? Some guys aren't. Some guys are. I'm good with mine. I don't have a fancy, nice car like I used to. I have a good car. I have an okay car. I like it. I'm good. Will it be what I'll always drive? No, because eventually I do want to upgrade again. What kind of home, neighborhood do you want to live in? Are you good with it? Are you okay with where you're at? And none of that means you have to, like, nobody here has to all be rich and everyone's a millionaire and all these things. None of that has to be a thing. But what happens is your standards, sometimes you're frustrated. You're like, man, I wish I had a better house, better car, better wife, better all these things, right? But it's because you're living below the standard. You're living below the necessity because you refuse to do anything about it. You blame COVID, you blame Governor Newsom, you blame whoever, you blame the president, you blame everyone else because you won't look at you. The only way forward is to raise the standards for yourself. Even the question of what kind of life do you want to provide for your kids? If you're not happy with the life you're providing for your kids, guess whose fault that is? It's not your wife's. It's not the president's. It's not the stimulus check you didn't get. It's not your job's fault. It is your responsibility. So you must raise your own standards to determine, what do you want to attract into your life? What kind of man do I want to be? How do I want to show up? In order for you to get to the place of where you go, I am living at the place of necessity that I need to be at for me. So I'm going to talk about 4 different sort of practical tools, if you will, for you to raise your necessity, to raise your internal necessity so that you can be at a place where you're living at a higher standard for yourself, for your kids, for your wife, for your job, for all of those things, so that you can move forward and be an empowered man. Number one thing you got to do is set a new standard. I mean, this is like a duh moment. When I started really thinking about, like, what were the changes that I went through personally with my wife and filing for divorce and all these things, I set a new standard. And I was like, you know what? In the midst of all the counseling, in the midst of all these things, I don't want to live like this. I refuse to be in a toxic relationship. So I'm setting a new standard. If you're going to be married to me, if we are going to be in a healthy relationship, then the standard has to be this. And that is that we communicate healthy, that I communicate healthy, that we have boundaries with each other, and that we live in a non-toxic environment. Because I refuse to live like this anymore. I refuse to have the knots in my stomach anymore. I refuse. I don't want to live like that anymore. So you set a new standard, and then you start to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Now, this came out of Brendon Burchard's book on high performance habits. And he talks about this idea of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that is the only way to grow, is to get uncomfortable. If you've ever tried to roller skate for the first time, or watch people try to roller skate for the first time, it's funny as heck. Why? Because people are trying to get comfortable in their awkwardness and their uncomfortableness. But the only way you to begin doing it is to actually go and do it. When I was doing certain weight exercises, getting back into my strength training program, my trainer was like, dude, there were certain things you couldn't do. Like, I would give you the weight, or I would give you this thing, and your body would just be all shaking and, trying to do certain movements. And it's because I was uncomfortable. My body was uncomfortable doing this new thing. But the only way for growth, the only way for me to raise my standard, is to get comfortable with uncomfortable things. So you set a new standard and you say, I don't want a toxic relationship anymore. I don't want to have this kind of relationship with a person anymore because it's not healthy. And so getting comfortable with uncomfortable for you looks like you saying to your wife, you setting a boundary and saying, I refuse to argue with you. I refuse to scream at you anymore. I refuse to be in this toxic type of relationship with you anymore. I will change the way I respond. Because I am the master of my fate, because I am responsible, I will change the way I show up. I will change the way I do those things. And if I do that, I at least have an opportunity to lead her to a new place. We have a lot of clients in the VIP program where they started changing the way they communicated, because that's the first thing we attack in the program, their communication and boundaries. When we started doing that, or when they started implementing some of those things, they're like, oh my gosh, this was the first time I said something to her and she didn't blow up. I'm like, yeah, because you got comfortable in the uncomfortableness of what you've got to do. And because we give them tools and tactics that don't feel comfortable, they feel awkward as fuck, as a matter of fact, for a man to communicate the way we teach them how to communicate. When we say we're going to drop a power statement here, we're going to set the narrative and drop a power triangle, all those things, they're like, what? I don't, and they hem and haw, and they're like, oh my gosh. We're working with them on Voxer and we help them script it out. And they're like, man, that's great. They put it into play and they're like, holy shit, it fucking worked. I'm like, yeah. Like every guy, it's like, wow, it worked. I'm like, yeah, because we're humans, and humans are desired for connection. And the way you've been living has been below the standard of what you know is what you're capable of doing. And so a man has to set a new standard. He has to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And then the next thing he's got to do is track the performance. I mean, that's what it comes back to. If you're not tracking or measuring these things, if you're not actually being held accountable to the changes you're trying to make, you are living like an orphan. You are living like someone who refuses to submit to authority. You're living like someone who says, I've got it all figured out. I don't need anyone's help. I'm just going to do it on my own. And that's fine. You can. I had a guy the other day, that decided to enroll into our VIP program. And one of the things we talked about was why he wanted to come in. And I said, what is the real motivation? He's like, honestly, I have a lot of information. I've read books, I've read blogs, I've talked to therapists, I've talked to counselors, I've done all these things. But the end of the day is, I don't really have anybody that can hold me accountable. And not even just accountable to, did you do an action, but hold me accountable to the new standard of way of living. Oh my gosh. Men, if you could come to such a place of humility, because that's the only way we let you in our VIP program, is if you come to a place of humility. You come to a place of such humility, and where you're willing to let other men speak in your life, where you're willing to let other men say, hey, you're not doing it right. Let's fix it. We're not here to shame you. We're going to help you get better. You can track your performance and you can see the growth that you've got. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, you must move on from what you want to feel to who you want to become. It's an absolute key thing. You've got to move on from what you want to feel to who you want to become. Feeling is great, like feeling good and feeling good about how I communicate. It's awesome, but it's something different when it starts to become about who you are wanting to become. And that is what we do in our Empowered Man VIP program. We help men set an identity-based outcome where they start to look at themselves in a completely different way. They raise their standards, they raise their necessity, and they go, fuck, I am going after that. I am going after that. If you want to learn more about that, empoweredman.co/book. empoweredman.co/book. I'll take you to our application and we'll walk you through that process. But here's the thing. You can decide right now, I want to raise my necessity. I want to raise my standard. I'm sick of living like this. I'm sick of living below what I think is ideal for me or where I should be. So you got to do this. Set the new standard. Decide right now what that new standard is. No more toxic relationship. I'm going to make more money from my job, or I'm going to go start a business. I'm going to be more intentional with my kids. Set that standard, but be specific. Be specific. What does that actually look like? I'm going to tuck my kids in every single night. I'm going to make $10,000 more per year by 6 months from now because I'm going to pick up a side hustle, or I'm going to get another job. Guys, money should never be an issue for anybody in America. We have jobs aplentiful. We have economy aplentiful. There is plenty of wealth to go around for you to make a good living. There should never be a guy that goes hungry. I understand mental illness and things like that can get into the way. But if a guy is ready and able, if you're struggling financially, you need to look at your own mindset. There are issues in your head that are stopping you from making money. And I know this from personal experience. I did not grow up rich. I did not grow up with lots of money. I did not grow up successful. In fact, I flailed around for probably a good 20 years of my adulthood because I struggled with my own mindset and my own beliefs about money, my own beliefs about my worthiness to actually be in that place. So I'm going to challenge you to set a new standard. I'm going to challenge you to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I'm going to challenge you to actually track and keep account of your performance. Guys, that's it today. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of you. Any questions? Feel free to pop them in our comments below. If not, I will talk to you later. Hey, if what you heard today really resonated with you and you want to connect with me, then here's what I want you to do. Pull out your phone right now and go to empoweredman.co/group. That's empoweredman.co, not com.co/group. So you can join our free Facebook group and connect with me there. We also have a ton of free content and trainings in that group to help you when you join. So until then, this is Mark signing off on Empowered AF.